I overheard my wife at a restaurant saying the most devastating thing about me to another man. She called me pathetic, boring, a walking ATM. She had no idea her husband was sitting 3 booths away, planning her complete destruction. My name is Preston Wells. I'm 45 years old, and I run a logistics company that employs 63 people across 3 states. For 20 years, I built something from nothing, started with 1 truck and a dream, ended up with a fleet that could move mountains if you paid the freight costs. I thought I was building security for my family. Turns out I was just building a target on my back. My wife Claudia and I have been married 18 years. We have 2 kids, Daniel, who's 17 and getting ready for college applications, and Iris, our 14-year-old daughter who still thinks her old man hung the moon. At least, I hope she still thinks that after everything that's about to unfold. The night everything fell apart started like any other business dinner. I was at Romano's, this upscale Italian place downtown, trying to close a deal with a potential client from Memphis. Big contract, worth about $2 million in annual revenue if I could land it. I was sitting in the back corner booth, the kind with high backs that make you feel like you're in your own private world. That's when I heard her voice. Claudia was 3 booths behind me, and I almost didn't recognize the laugh at first. It was different, sharper, more alive than anything I'd heard from her in months. My first thought was surprise. She told me she was having dinner with her college friend Sarah, catching up on old times. But this didn't sound like catching up with girlfriends. Then I heard her say my name, and something in my chest went cold. Preston's so predictable, it's actually painful, she was saying, her voice carrying that tone she used when she thought she was being clever. He thinks providing for the family makes him some kind of hero, like writing checks is the same as being a real man. I should have gotten up right then. Should have walked over and confronted whatever this was. Instead, I sat frozen, my client across from me asking about delivery timelines while my world started spinning off its axis. He's got no fire left, Dwight, Claudia continued, and hearing another man's name hit me like a freight truck. No passion, no spontaneity. Just work, 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 and those boring stories about trucking routes and warehouse efficiency. God, sometimes I feel like I'm married to a calculator. The man's voice was deeper, confident in a way that made my jaw tighten. So why stay? You're only 43, Claudia. You've got time to start over. Money, she said simply, and I swear I heard her shrug. Preston's built a nice little empire, and once Daniel graduates and goes to college, I won't feel guilty about taking half of it. Dwight, this is the worst thing I've probably ever said about anyone, but my husband is basically just a financial safety net at this point. I'm counting down the days until I can cash out. That's when I knew I just overheard the worst thing my wife had ever said about me. And in that moment, sitting in that restaurant booth with my client still talking about shipping schedules, I made a decision that would change everything. She'd never see me coming. I somehow managed to finish the business dinner. Don't ask me how. My mind was spinning like a broken compass, but my mouth kept moving on autopilot. The client from Memphis shook my hand, said he'd have an answer by Friday, and walked out none the wiser that he'd just witnessed a man's world implode in real time. Claudia was still at her table when I stood up, her back to me. She was leaning forward, laughing at something this Dwight character was saying. Even from behind, I could see the body language, the way she touched her neck, played with her hair. This wasn't catching up with an old friend. This was a woman on a date. I paid my bill and walked past her table on my way out. Got a good look at him. Mid-40s, athletic build, expensive suit. The kind of guy who probably drove a BMW and talked about his CrossFit routine at parties. Everything I wasn't, apparently. Neither of them noticed me. Why would they? According to my wife, I was just a walking ATM with no personality. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes, watching through the restaurant windows. They ordered dessert. She fed him a bite of tiramisu. He reached across and squeezed her hand. Normal couple stuff, except she was my wife, and he definitely wasn't me. My phone buzzed with a text from Claudia. Running late with Sarah. Don't wait up. Love you. Love you. 2 words that used to mean everything, now feeling like counterfeit bills in my pocket. I drove home in a daze, muscle memory guiding me through familiar streets while my brain tried to process what I'd witnessed. Daniel was in his room doing homework, music leaking through his closed door. Iris was asleep, her face peaceful in the hallway nightlight's glow. These kids, our kids, had no idea their mother was planning to blow up their lives for a midlife crisis and a bigger bank account. I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and sat in my home office, staring at family photos on the wall. Our wedding day, vacations, Christmas mornings. All of it suddenly felt like elaborate theater, with me as the only one who didn't know he was performing. Claudia came home at 11:47 p.m. I heard her heels on the hardwood, the careful way she closed the front door. She peeked into the office where I was pretending to review shipping manifests. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice artificially bright. "How was your dinner?" I looked up at her, this woman I'd shared a bed with for 18 years, and saw a complete stranger. "Productive," I said simply. "How was Sarah?" "Oh, you know Sarah." Claudia waved her hand dismissively. "Same old stories about her ex-husband and her terrible job. Poor thing never changes." The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly, I almost admire the craftsmanship. "I'm heading to bed," she announced, already turning away. "Don't stay up too late with those reports." She kissed my forehead, a gesture that once felt loving, now felt like a consolation prize. After she left, I sat there for another hour, planning my next move. Because this wasn't over. This was just beginning. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in 20 years of marriage. I called in sick to work and follow my wife. Claudia left the house at her usual time, 8:15 a.m., coffee in hand, and that fake smile she'd been wearing lately. She told the kids she had an early client meeting, kissed them both goodbye, and walked out like she was heading to just another day at the office. I waited 5 minutes, then got in my personal car, not the company truck she'd recognize, and tailed her through morning traffic. Basic surveillance, nothing fancy. Just a husband trying to confirm what his gut already knew. She didn't go to her marketing firm. Instead, she drove across town to a coffee shop called the Daily Grind, the kind of place that charged $6 for what used to cost 50 cents. I parked across the street and watched through the window as she sat at a corner table, checking her phone every 30 seconds like she was waiting for someone. At 9:23 a.m., Dwight walked in. He was even more polished in daylight, crisp shirt, expensive watch, the kind of confident stride that came from never having to worry about making payroll or keeping 63 employees fed. He slid into the seat across from my wife like he owned the place. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I didn't need to. The body language told the whole story. Leaning forward, touching hands across the table, her throwing her head back at his jokes. This wasn't their first coffee date. This was routine. They stayed for 47 minutes. I know because I timed it, sitting in my car like some discount private investigator. When they left together, walking to separate cars in the parking lot, he pulled her close for a kiss that lasted way too long for a casual goodbye. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, I thought it might snap. I followed Claudia to her actual office after that, watched her walk inside like nothing had happened. Then I drove to my own company, told my assistant I was feeling better, and buried myself in logistics reports. But my mind wasn't on shipping schedules. It was on planning. That evening, I acted normal, asked about her day, listened to her elaborate lies about client meetings and project deadlines. She was good at it, smooth, detailed, convincing. Made me wonder how long she'd been practicing. "How was your client meeting this morning?" I asked casually over dinner. "Exhausting," Claudia replied without missing a beat. "New campaign for a restaurant chain. They want everything changed at the last minute." Daniel looked up from his plate. "Which restaurant, Mom?" For just a split second, I saw panic flicker across her face. "Oh, it's still confidential," she recovered quickly. "You know how these things work." Our son nodded and went back to his food, but I caught that moment of uncertainty. The first visible sign that the lie was getting harder to maintain. Over the next week, I became a man with a mission. During lunch breaks and after hours, I started documenting everything. Times, places, phone records I could access through a shared account, credit card statements that showed charges I didn't recognize. The coffee shop became a regular stop for them. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, same corner table, same routine. I started taking photos from across the street. Nothing dramatic, just evidence for later use. But the real breakthrough came when I remembered something about Claudia's phone habits. She'd always been careless with technology, using the same passwords for everything, syncing all her accounts without thinking about security. For a woman planning to rob me blind, she had terrible operational security. I accessed her cloud storage from my office computer. What I found that made my stomach turn. Hundreds of text messages between her and Dwight going back 8 months. Photos I never wanted to see. But worse than the intimate stuff were the conversations about me, about our marriage, about their plans. Preston works such long hours, he doesn't notice anything. She'd written 3 weeks ago. I could probably move in with you, and he'd think I was just staying late at the office. His response, not yet. Wait until after the holidays. Let the kids have one more normal Christmas before you blow up their world. One more normal Christmas. Like our family was a business they were planning to liquidate after the fiscal year ended. The most damaging messages were recent, from just 2 days after I'd overheard them at the restaurant. He seemed suspicious last night, Claudia had texted. Asked more questions than usual about my day. Maybe he's finally waking up, Dwight replied. We might need to accelerate our timeline. No, she'd written back. Preston's too trusting. Always has been. I could tell him the sky was green, and he'd ask what shade. We stick to the plan. Daniel graduates in May. Then we make our move. Make our move. Like divorcing me was a chess game, and I was too stupid to see the board. I printed everything. Made copies. Stored them in a safety deposit box I opened at a bank across town. Then I called the best divorce attorney in the state, a woman named Rebecca Martinez who had a reputation for protecting men's assets when their marriages went south. Mr. Wells, she said after reviewing my evidence, your wife has made several critical errors. First, she documented everything. Second, she's planning to wait, which gives us time to protect your interests. And third, she's underestimating you. What's our next move? I asked. Rebecca smiled. We're going to make sure that when she tries to take half of everything you've built, she walks away with nothing but regret. The hardest conversation of my life happened on a Saturday morning in November. I'd asked Quentin Hayes, Claudia's brother, to meet me for coffee. Not at the Daily Grind. That place was contaminated now, but at a small diner on the outskirts of town where nobody knew us. Quentin was a family therapist, 3 years younger than Claudia, but infinitely wiser about human nature. He'd always been the reasonable one in her family, the person who called out bad behavior regardless of blood relations. Preston, he said as we settled into a corner booth. You look like hell. What's going on? I handed him a folder containing printed copies of text messages and photos. Not the intimate stuff. I wouldn't put him through that, but enough to show the scope of what his sister was planning. He read through everything in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. When he finished, he set the papers down and rubbed his face with both hands. How long have you known? Quentin asked finally. 2 weeks, I said. I've been documenting everything since then. Jesus, Preston, I'm so sorry. He shook his head. I knew something was off with Claudia lately. She's been different at family gatherings, distracted, secretive. But I never imagined this. The kids don't know yet, I said. I'm not sure how to tell them. Quentin leaned forward. Let me help with that. Daniel and Iris are going to need professional support through this, and they're going to need to understand that none of this is their fault. We spend the next hour planning. Quentin would gradually prepare the kids for difficult news without revealing specifics. He'd also help me identify the right moment to have the conversation. Most importantly, he agreed to serve as a character witness when this inevitably went to court. There's something else, I said as we prepare to leave. I need to secure my business assets before Claudia realizes what's happening. What do you mean? She's planning to take half of everything I've built, I explained. But the company has 63 employees who depend on those paychecks. I won't let her greed destroy their livelihoods. That afternoon, I met with my business attorney and accountant. We restructured the company ownership, moving my personal shares into a trust that protected them from divorce proceedings. It was completely legal business protection strategies that should have been in place years ago. By Monday morning, my logistics company was bulletproof. Claudia could try to claim half of everything, but she'd find out the hard way that everything was now much smaller than she'd calculated. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, she'd complained that I spent too much time focused on business. Now, that business focus was going to be her downfall. 3 weeks after discovering the truth, I made the decision that would change everything. It was a Tuesday morning, and Claudia was getting ready for another client meeting, which I now knew was code for breakfast with Dwight. She was humming in the bathroom, applying makeup with the kind of care she hadn't shown for me in months. Happy, content, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. I'll be late tonight, she called out. not even looking at me. Big presentation for the restaurant chain. Might not be home until after 10. The restaurant chain that didn't exist. The presentation that was actually a dinner date with her boyfriend. No problem, I said calmly. I've got some late meetings myself. After she left, I sat in my truck in the driveway for a full 10 minutes, thinking about the phone call I was about to make. Once I did this, there was no going back. No reconciliation, no counseling, no working through her problems. This was a nuclear option, but she'd already chosen nuclear when she decided I was nothing more than a paycheck with legs. I called Rebecca Martinez. I'm ready to file, I told her. Are you sure, Mr. Wells? Once we serve her, she'll know you've been investigating. I'm sure, I said, and I want her served at her office, in front of her colleagues. I want everyone to know exactly who she really is. That can be arranged, Rebecca said. We'll have the papers ready by Thursday. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I cooked dinner for my family. Real dinner, not takeout or something from the freezer. Grilled steaks, roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes from scratch. Daniel raised an eyebrow when he saw the spread. What's the occasion, Dad? He asked. Can't a man cook for his family without an occasion? I replied, but the truth was more complicated. This might be one of our last normal dinners together, and I wanted it to be memorable for the right reasons. Claudia came home at 10:47 p.m., claiming the presentation had run long. She barely touched the plate I'd kept warm for her, too busy checking her phone and smiling at messages I knew weren't from clients. This looks wonderful, she said, but her tone was distracted, obligatory. Sorry I missed dinner with everyone. Don't worry about it, I said, watching her scroll through what were undoubtedly sweet nothings from Dwight. There will be plenty of opportunities for family dinners in the future. She looked up at me then, maybe catching something in my tone, but I kept my expression neutral. Let her wonder. Let her think she was still in control of the situation. After 20 years of marriage, I'd become invisible to her. But invisible men see everything, and what I'd seen was going to destroy her carefully constructed fantasy. Thursday couldn't come soon enough. I was ready for her to finally see me again. The process server delivered the divorce papers to Claudia's office at 2:15 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. I know the exact time because Rebecca called me immediately afterward. It's done, she said simply. Your wife has been served. I was sitting in my truck outside Daniel's school, waiting for his basketball practice to end, when my phone started ringing. Claudia's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again, and again. By the time Daniel jogged out to the parking lot, sweaty and exhausted from practice, I had 7 missed calls and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. Where are you? Call me now. What the hell is this? You can't just disappear and ambush me like this. Daniel climbed into the passenger seat, glancing at my phone as another call came through. Mom's really trying to reach you, he observed. Yeah, I said, turning off the phone completely. We'll talk to her at home. The drive back was tense. Daniel kept shooting me worried looks, clearly sensing that something major was happening. When we pulled into the driveway, Claudia's car was already there. She'd left work early, probably racing home in a panic. I found her in the kitchen, pacing like a caged animal, still clutching the legal documents. Her face was red, eyes wild with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Preston, she started the moment she saw me. What is this? Some kind of sick joke. No joke, I said calmly, setting my keys on the counter. It's exactly what it looks like. You can't just file for divorce without talking to me first. We have problems, but we can work through them. This is insane. I looked at this woman who'd spent months planning to destroy our family, now acting shocked that I'd beaten her to the punch. Like you were planning to work through them with Dwight? I asked. The color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked genuinely surprised, as if she'd forgotten that actions have consequences. I don't know what you think you know, she began, but I cut her off. I know everything, Claudia. The coffee shop meetings, the texts, the plans to wait until Daniel graduates so you can take half of everything I've built. I know that you think I'm pathetic and boring, and that Dwight is more of a partner than I ever was. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She'd been caught completely off guard, unprepared for a fight she thought would happen on her timeline. Where are the kids? She asked suddenly, apparently realizing that Daniel and Iris weren't around. Quinn picked them up, I said. They're spending the night at his place while we sort this out. You told my brother about our personal business. Your brother deserved to know that his sister was planning to blow up 2 families for a midlife crisis. That's when the tears started. Not genuine emotion, but calculated performance. The same routine she'd probably used to manipulate me for years. Preston, please, she said, reaching for my arm. We can fix this. I made a mistake, but we can get through it together. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. No, Claudia. We can't. Because this wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. And now I have my own plan. For the first time in our marriage, she looked at me with something resembling respect. Not love, not affection, but the recognition that she was no longer dealing with the pushover she'd married. She'll never see me the same way again, I thought, watching her process the reality of her situation. And honestly, that felt exactly right. The conversation with Daniel and Iris happened 2 days later, on a Saturday morning at Quentin's office. I'd wanted neutral ground, somewhere safe where they could process their emotions without feeling trapped. Daniel sat in the chair closest to me, 17 years old, and trying to act like an adult, even though I could see the scared kid underneath. Iris curled up on the couch, 14 and still young enough to hope this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Kids, I began, your Uncle Quentin and I need to tell you some things about what's been happening with your mom and me. Are you getting divorced? Daniel asked bluntly. He'd always been direct, a trait I'd encouraged. Now it was both helpful and heartbreaking. Yes, I said. We are. Iris made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Quentin moved closer to her, offering silent support. Why? She asked. I thought everything was okay. This was the moment I'd been dreading. How do you explain betrayal to a 14-year-old without destroying her relationship with her mother? Sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love. I said carefully. Your mom has been seeing someone else, making plans that didn't include keeping our family together. Daniel's jaw tightened. For how long? Several months, I admitted. I knew something was wrong, he said quietly. She's been different, distracted, and she's been lying about where she goes. Iris was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Does she not love us anymore? She loves you both very much, I said, and I meant it. Whatever Claudia had done to our marriage, she genuinely cared about the kids. This is about her relationship with me, not with you. Where are we going to live? Daniel asked. What's going to happen to us? You're going to live with me, I said firmly. In our house, with your same schools, your same friends. I'm going to make sure your lives stay as normal as possible. What about Mom? Iris asked. Your mom will always be your mom. Quentin interjected gently. She'll still be part of your lives, just differently than before. We talked for another hour, answering their questions as honestly as possible. Daniel was angry, not just at his mother, but at the whole situation. Iris was confused and hurt, struggling to understand how the family she trusted could fall apart so suddenly. Dad, Daniel said as we prepared to leave, I want you to know that I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Mom's been treating you badly for months, and I was starting to lose respect for you because you weren't doing anything about it. His words hit me like a truck. My own son had been watching me accept disrespect, had been losing faith in me because I'd been too trusting, too passive. I should have acted sooner, I admitted. Maybe, he said, but you acted when it mattered. That's what counts. Iris hugged me fiercely as we walked to the car. I love you, Daddy, she whispered. I love you too, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay. And for the first time in months, I actually believed that might be true. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized in a courtroom that felt more like a business meeting than the end of an 18-year marriage. Claudia sat across the room with her attorney, looking smaller somehow, defeated in a way I'd never seen before. Her relationship with Dwight had imploded within weeks of the divorce filing. Apparently, when faced with the reality of an actual relationship instead of a fantasy affair, he'd decided she was too much drama for his taste. The man who'd promised to be her partner had vanished the moment things got complicated. Claudia's attorney had tried every angle to get more money, but Rebecca had been thorough. The business protections held. The asset transfers were legal and binding. In the end, Claudia walked away with her car, her personal belongings, and a modest settlement that would cover basic living expenses for about 2 years if she was careful. Mr. Wells, the judge said, you've been awarded primary custody of both minor children, with standard visitation rights for Mrs. Wells. The property division stands as agreed upon by both parties. I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. This wasn't how I'd wanted our story to end, but it was the ending her choices had written. After the hearing, Claudia approached me in the courthouse hallway. She looked older, worn down by months of legal battles and public embarrassment. "Preston," she said quietly, "I want you to know that I never meant for things to go this far." "What did you mean for them to go?" I asked. She couldn't answer that, because we both knew the truth. She meant to use me until she didn't need me anymore, then discard me on her terms. "The kids miss having you around more," I said, which was partially true. They'd been struggling with a divorce, but they were also angry at her for the lies and deception. "Can we try to do better going forward?" she asked. "For Daniel and Iris?" "We could try," I agreed. "But Claudia, they're not little kids anymore. They understand what happened, and they're going to need time to trust you again." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I know I destroyed everything good we had." "Yeah," I said simply. "You did." 6 months later, I got a text from Quentin. Claudia had moved to another state, taken a job with a marketing firm in Phoenix. She called the kids every week and visited once a month, but the easy relationship she'd once had with them was gone. "She's trying," Quentin told me during one of our regular check-ins. "But she's having to rebuild from zero, and that's hard for someone who's used to being adored." Daniel had started his senior year with a new sense of maturity, no longer taking family stability for granted. Iris was seeing a counselor and slowly learning to trust again. Both kids had chosen to stay with me full-time rather than split custody. "You did the right thing, Preston," Quentin said as we watched Daniel practice basketball. "It wasn't easy, but you protected them when it mattered most." I nodded, but my focus was on my son, driving toward the basket with determination I recognized. He'd learned something valuable from watching his father fight for his family. Sometimes the hardest lessons teach us how to be stronger. 2 years after the divorce, I was sitting in the same diner where I'd first talked to Quentin about Claudia's betrayal. But this time, I wasn't there to discuss problems. I was there to celebrate solutions. Daniel had just been accepted to 3 different colleges, including his first choice. His application essay had been about resilience and learning to trust your instincts when something feels wrong. The admissions counselor said it was one of the most mature pieces of writing she'd read from a high school senior. Iris, now 16, was thriving academically and had started dating a boy from her chemistry class. A polite kid who actually looked me in the eye when we talked and helped clear the dinner table without being asked. She'd learned to value respect over charm, substance over smooth talk. My logistics company had expanded to 5 states, partly because I'd thrown myself into work during the worst months of the divorce, but mostly because protecting the business had forced me to innovate in ways that made us more competitive. "You know what I'm proudest of?" Quentin asked over coffee. "The kids never saw you lose control. Even when everything was falling apart, you stayed focused on being their father." There were nights I wanted to fall apart, I admitted. When I'd sit in my truck after following Claudia to another secret meeting, I felt like everything I'd believed about my life was a lie. "But you didn't fall apart. You got angry, then you got strategic." That was true. The anger had been fuel, not destruction. It had powered me through months of legal proceedings, difficult conversations, and the slow process of rebuilding our family structure. Claudia still lived in Phoenix. She found a new boyfriend, an accountant who seemed stable and kind. The kids had met him during their last visit, and both reported that he treated their mother well and didn't try to replace me as their father. "She seems happier," Iris had told me after that trip. "More like the mom I remember from when I was little." "That's good," I'd replied, and meant it. Whatever anger I'd carried toward Claudia had long since burned out, replaced by indifference and a determination to focus on the future rather than the past. Last month, I'd started dating someone new, a woman named Sarah who ran a small business consulting firm. She was divorced too, with a teenage daughter of her own. We'd met at a Chamber of Commerce event, bonded over stories about the challenges of single parenting, and discovered we had more in common than either of us expected. "She's different from Mom," Daniel had observed after meeting Sarah for the first time. "More direct, less dramatic. Is that good or bad?" I'd asked. "Definitely good," he'd said without hesitation. "Drama is overrated." Iris agreed. "Sarah treats you like an equal," she told me. "Mom always acted like she was doing you a favor by being married to you." Out of the mouths of babes. As I drove home from the diner that afternoon, I reflected on how much had changed since that night. I'd overheard the worst thing my wife had ever said about me. Back then, I thought my world was ending. Turned out it was just beginning. The house felt peaceful as I pulled into the driveway. Daniel's car was there. He'd driven himself home from a college visit. Iris's bike was leaning against the garage door, meaning she was probably inside doing homework. My family was smaller now, but it was also stronger, built on truth instead of lies, respect instead of convenience, and love that didn't require anyone to pretend to be someone they weren't. I'd learned something valuable in that restaurant booth 2 years ago. Sometimes the worst thing someone can say about you is also the most liberating. Because once you know where you really stand, you can finally decide where you want to go.